I will ask you to remember that phrase. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. That is why the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. Think of this phrase. Meditate on this phrase. Pray upon this phrase during this week as you think upon our lessons, because many of them will refer back to this image. The Sabbath is made for man, not man for the Sabbath. That is why the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. And it references to today's lesson of reflection on judgment. The scribes and Pharisees, doctors of the Jewish church law, were scandalized. They called the disciples frequently and said, "Why does your teacher eat with these people?" These people being sinners. And like in today's gospel, the Pharisees, with their noses all out of joint, said, "Why are they doing what is unlawful? Why are they eating the heads of grain?" And yet, the Son of God reminds them that David himself did something much more worse, much more unlawful, when he and his companions, not just the king, but his companions too, ate the bread that was only lawful for the priests to eat. But of course, the Pharisees wouldn't abide by that. They wouldn't admit to that. They wouldn't ever admit to David doing anything wrong. No, no, no. But the Pharisees believed, as the scribes and the Sadducees and all of their other little friends, according to their skewed and canted interpretation of Jewish cleansing requirements and Jewish law that they had made, that to eat with someone who was unclean or to eat something unlawful during the Sabbath, it was sinful. It wasn't to be done. You had to have the ritual sin sacrifice at temple to remove the sins. That is, ooh, you'll love this, they had to pay a fee to buy a young bull if it was very sinful, or otherwise just a young lamb or goat. For a woman, you could just buy a pair of matched doves. And you paid the temple for the bull, the lamb, the goat, or the doves. And that way they sacrificed the animal. And they partook of the sin offering meat, because the blood could not be used, because that's what the offering was. The sin offering was the meat, was the blood, because that was the sinful part. But the meat portions of it were then given to non-Jews. But this wasn't truly Jewish Mosaic law, but the traditions that came from about as the Jewish faith was turned, changed to fit the mores and the financial needs of the very powerful men within each synagogue, especially this one. They took the money that was gained by paying the sin fees, by paying for the sacrifices. Jesus, in his almighty Father, knew that there was nothing wrong with any of these people, the tax collectors, the money changers, other men and women who were labelled sinners because of their employment. The tax was set, and then each was allowed to add an additional amount to each collection, determined by the tax collector that, by law, was to collect his wages for having collected the tax from each person. But that opened up each to the opportunity to the sin of greed, or possibly even theft. And thus many of the tax collectors were the wealthiest persons of their area, those who took the greed offering. The money changers changed each transaction for a percentage of the money. For instance, if I was changing gold to coin, because Romans dealt in coin, they took a percentage of that. And the money changers were skilled at monetary transactions and math. And the average person couldn't know what the price of gold, silver, or bronze was against the Roman coin. This too presented an opportunity to the sin of greed, and then of theft. A cardinal sin combined with a mortal sin within each transaction. Very dangerous for the soul. Others called sinful were all who worked directly for an income. Prostitutes, porters, less so bakers, but then tradesmen, because they were always included, because anyone who received cash was thought low, quote, brought low by the filth of money, which later became the phrase you are all familiar, filthy lucre. But tradespeople also worked in barter, so they weren't as dirty as those doing the direct physical labor, as were the prostitutes and porters who couldn't do barter. All needed to be brought back to God, to faith. All needed forgiveness, which would be the love and acceptance of all, by all, but beginning by being modeled and shown by Jesus. Love and forgiveness in and of itself. Jesus heard the words of these officials and said, "Those who are well do not need a physician, but the sick do. I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners." Jesus is the physician to the sinners sick. They are the sinners he is calling to himself for redemption. The righteous, of course, are already saved. God's mercy seeks everyone, forgives everyone, he says. The only thing he asks of you is to say, "Yes, help me." That is all. In the same vein, in today's gospel, we have people again inappropriately sitting in judgment of their brothers and sisters, when they themselves are so full of sin, they have hearts black and as hardened as rock. Do the scribes and Pharisees today. They even manage to overlook the fact of their own planning of the murders, including the murder of the Son of Man. They don't see this as sinful, though it casts them, and what few of their spawn survive, into Gehenna for eternity. For there's no repenting for murdering the Son of God. Judge not, lest ye be judged, and the measure by which ye use to measure the other shall be used on ye, and ye shall ever be found wanting on each measurement.